Welcome, welcome. This is Gull, your money mindset expert. And today we have the pleasure of the amazing, the wonderful, the magical Susan Kennard. Welcome, Susan.
Oh, girl, thank you so much. And thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for being such an amazing guest. So people have heard your intro, Susan, so they know how amazing you are. But please, in your own words, can you tell everybody what it is that you do?
I'm known as a spiritual scientist. And the reason why I'm known as a spiritual scientist is because my background is very traditional, very, very scientific, very much looking at the mind and the body. And then stepping out of the spiritual closet many years ago, which I'll talk to you more about shortly, I became a channel for Source. So
Mm.
I work with Source in many, many levels, which I'll discuss later. So I incorporate the soul healing the body and understanding much more about what our mission is in this life.
Wonderful. What an amazing role and what an amazing purpose. So, Susan, we want to hear, I mean, this is such an amazing transition from science to
Mhm.
spirituality. And I definitely relate to it because I went from being a banking finance lawyer, which is really about numbers and logical and all that, to intuitive healings. I've done a similar sort of transition as you have, but I
Yeah.
want to know and everybody else wants to know your journey. How did you
Mm,
come to being who you are and doing what you do, especially if you
sure.
were in the science field? How did you step away from that and open up yourself to the wonderful world of spirituality? Talk us through.
It happened when I was around about 27, which in astrology is your Saturn return.
Okay.
And I didn't know that at the time, but around about, I'm 52 now, and it was around about, I was about 26, 27.
Mm.
And I was working in child protection. I was a
Mm-hmm.
trauma specialist
Mm-hmm.
and I was doing quite a lot of research. So I'm psychology, psychotherapy, and neuropsychology, etc. later.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing some research into early childhood trauma and working with in a centre and doing that research on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my postgraduate in psychotherapy. And I had an experience where a very good friend of mine called Martin, who had previously been a boyfriend, actually took his life.
Oh,
And he
okay.
was very, very young. He was 34 at the time. And when we went out together, he'd spoken about when he was 17, he tried to take his life and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And we were, he lived the other side of the world. So I was in the UK. Actually, at that time, I was in London,
Mm-hmm.
fairly near you.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in New Zealand. And
Right.
his girlfriend actually let me know that he'd taken his life. And of course, that was a devastating thing to hear,
Yeah.
because as a friend, I would have liked to have, been able to support him as many people listening to this maybe have had a similar situation,
Yeah.
where we then haven't got that opportunity. Anyway, 3 months later, just kind of getting over, the grief and so on, I had a visitation. And I was such an evidence based, I still am, but an
Mm.
evidence based practitioner. And so to have this visitation where I actually felt that someone was in the room. Now, I lived on my own in a flat in London. I
Mm-hmm.
felt someone was in the room, and I felt like literally someone was waking me up with my shoulders, but I couldn't move. So I was awake, but I wasn't awake, if you know what I mean. So I
Yeah.
was in my bed. And there was a sense that there was someone in the room. There was also a sense there was a dog. And I just remember thinking, not being afraid, but I was kind of, a bit afraid. I remember thinking, this feels really strange.
Mm.
So I knew someone was there, but at that time I didn't know it was Martin. So then I couldn't sleep. So for night after night after night, I couldn't sleep. And I told my friends, I said, oh my God, this was so scary. What if this happens again? So one of them got me a reading, and they got me a reading, and I'd never had a reading before in my life. This woman knew nothing about me, and she started describing Martin. And she said, I've got a gentleman here, and he's telling you that he's trying to let you know that he's absolutely fine and he visited you and so on. I'm like, oh, floods of tears, as you can imagine, that this woman knew nothing about me. Long story short, at the end of the reading, she looked at my hands and she said, and this is your path. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, you're a channel, you're a master psychic. And I said,
Mm.
really? No way. So anyway, I just dismissed it completely,
Mm-hmm.
and went about my daily kind of work that I was doing. And I started getting this sense that I started getting a sixth sense that I already had probably had, but I just had ignored it.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to know stuff. And then, being the researcher that I am, and I need evidence for everything, I chose to do meditation. So I found transcendental Maharishi Yogi meditation. And I just really, literally, from that day, my whole world opened up. And then I went to the College of Psychic Studies because I wanted to prove that this was not really how it was. Okay. So I thought it was mind and body, but I didn't know it was soul as well. Yeah. It just wasn't something I'd remembered. Obviously I knew it on a soul level, but I didn't know it. And so I just started to do lots of courses and went to loads of lectures and read loads of books. And my spiritual awakening was that moment, really, when I realized that actually I could see spirit, I could see into the body, and it all just blew me away. And so I just found out more and more about it. And then I realized that we were so much more than this physical body and this brain that I thought for so many years that's how it is. And then to realize that actually the soul is part of who we are, and it just goes on, and that we can communicate with. So I think if I hadn't have been given clairvoyance, obviously clear seeing, clairsentience and clair-knowing and clairaudience, if I hadn't been given that at that time, I probably would have just never gone down that road. So I think it was all planned. If I look at my soul plan, it was probably all planned. And that led me then to incorporate, live a double life, really, because in London at that time, all those years ago, in psychotherapy, you definitely didn't talk about being a medium. And you just, all the people in the office, they were like, oh, give me a reading. Can you give me a reading? But you actually kept it really quiet.
Yeah.
And so I ended up working on the platforms in London as a medium, giving evidence of survival in another life, and then working for local authority London as a specialist in early childhood trauma, doing all that research. And so that led me to have this kind of
double life,
two
really.
lives running parallel at the same time. And then it was many, many years later, after training as a naturopath, having my own children, all that kind of stuff, that actually 13 years ago, I stepped out of the spiritual closet. I had a practice in Harley Street. I had, I'd been in the media. I'd, been really very fortunate that I was interviewed a lot. And one day I just stepped out of that closet and said, actually, I work with spirit. I'm a channel for spirit, and I incorporate my working with PTSD and trauma and so on, and being a specialist in that with my work with spirit. And the doors, the floodgates opened, and the universe lined up, of course, because that's what happens when you step into your mission. And literally, the rest is history in a way. But then each year, another amazing opening happens, and light language came in about 4 years ago. I channeled my book, which is out next year, called Awaken the Light Within Your Heart. I won the Hay House publishing contract this year. Everything just opens, and as you step fully into who you are. So that was kind of like my first spiritual awakening, at 27. That was a doorway, but it definitely was not the only spiritual awakening. And the other one was being, a single parent with two babies. One was 11 months old, the other one was 2. They're now 14 and 12 and a half. And I found myself in a situation, in a very difficult relationship with the father of my children, and making a decision to actually preserve my children's well-being and myself. And that's when the journey happened of stepping out of the closet, the spiritual closet, I call it. And that was, so that was a second real spiritual awakening of empowerment. And what I do today is, I really help people to fully align to their true soul's mission by healing all of those aspects of perceptions of belief, trauma, past life and epigenetics, everything that stop them from truly living their true mission. And I do feel that dis-ease, you know, I'm a neuropsychologist as well, so I work with the metaphysical causes of dis-ease, studied viruses for many years, that's another story, and quite an apt story at the moment, but studied that for many years and looked at, you know, and I help people with pictures of messages in their body of dis-ease, of cancer, and all sorts. So not a doctor, don't claim to heal or cure, but I help people to find their own healing journey, and many have found their own healing journey home to themselves.
What a fascinating journey. And when I was listening to that, one part that I can definitely relate to is something similar to mine. And I would say I had two spiritual awakenings. One, when I became aware of my intuitive gifts, which was, I was just out training and I was always fascinated with different stuff. And I all of a sudden realized everything I'd seen in the past, it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't something that was a fragment of my imagination. It was actually genuine, real, that other people can see too. And that's came to me when I was training to be intuitive life coach. And then the second awakening, exactly the same as yours, when I became a single parent with my two children. When I was in a heavily abusive marriage, extremely abusive, but I held on to it with dear life. And but the final straw came when I caught him red-handed with this the lady. Well, I found about the affair in March, and then I had to catch him red-handed in August before I finally let go. It was awful marriage. And that was, and I was fully financially dependent on him at the time. And I remember when I made the decision, because by then I did a lot of pro bono work, but I've never took it on professionally. And that was my journey. Then I thought, I can do this. I'm very good at this. I'm actually really good at it. Let me go and make money from it. And then that's when all my money blocks came to surface. So that was my second spiritual awakening, because until that, I hadn't realized what money blocks I had, because they all came to the surface. Yeah. The universe is like, oh, wonderful, you want to do this? Great, but let's clear this first. Look at this first, as it does.
And what you'd attracted as well, Gull, you know, like, you know,
absolutely.
I took responsibility for what I'd attracted.
Yeah.
What a beautiful gift that was, to be in a relationship that was really difficult. You know, I speak about it in my book as well, you know, in detail, but it's, you know, it's a gift, isn't it? Because perhaps you wouldn't have been who you are today as I am.
Yeah, you know? I agree. I went ahead and what I realized doing something which is a core element of my teaching now is I manifested my mother's exact life, which is quite a contrast considering I'm a lawyer qualified in 3 jurisdictions. So I'm quite highly trained, and there's no reason for me to become, at least even if single parent is one thing, but becoming, you know, close to poverty, you know, having £137 and coming to her every 4 weeks, the dire situation I put myself into, it's difficult to understand. How can a lawyer put herself in that situation? How does she get things get that bad? But it makes sense to us because I was manifesting my mother's exact life. Hence, I pulled all those situations to myself to put myself in that scenario. And to
heal them, so that you stop the cycle of it.
Exactly. So that my daughter will not carry on. So this is a great awareness for me. And this is why I can definitely relate to you, that I had this second spiritual awakening then. And you need a bigger why than yourself, I think, especially if you are a giver, if you're a spiritually minded, that kind of generosity, you know, the generous person. You're okay, I'm okay. You kind of float around. But to be able to solidify and make a firm decision, you need to have a solid why. And your kids were your why, as were my kids were mine.
Totally, because I had no idea at that time. You know, I had a mortgage to pay, had children. But, you know, there's something, and I'm sure it was with you, Gull, it's like something just takes over. And that is your divine soul. And your soul knows 100% that was the right decision.
Yeah,
that was absolutely the right decision. And it, you know, as much as you have no idea how you're going to deal with it, and you have no idea, but you know that those babies or those children are your reason.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were discussing off camera before, but my biggest thing has always been about their education. And I'm really concerned. I'm a stickler for primary education, because I really do believe that that's important for them, and that's my belief. So my only concern was, and my biggest thing at the time I cried the most, not when our car was stolen, by the way, my car was stolen as well. And it
Oh,
wasn't
no.
insured. And I because there's an element of insurance. So the insurance has stopped, and it was stolen literally when the insurance was stopped. Can you imagine, right? I put it off, I put it on sworn, so there's no insurance because I couldn't afford it. And the car was stolen exactly when the insurance stopped. So I lost that last bit of thing as well. I cried more when I had to put my kids out there schooling or whatever than when my car was stolen, considering that was my last thing and all the gold was gone and everything else. But my goal was the kids are going to go back. And a year later, my kids were back. I mean, my son, I think it was about 2 years later, but I could have put him then as well. But I didn't want to risk of having two private kids, two going private school while I'm still building my business. So my daughter went. She was only out for 1 year, and she's back in. When you set those crazy goals, you achieve them.
Absolutely. And everyone around me, they said, oh, you know, all this, the family kind of side of things. But I said to my mum at that time, I said, Mum, I am going to be incredibly successful, and my children are never, ever going to want for anything. And that's exactly what's happened. But I always thought, and I don't know if you felt this, it was slightly different to you, but I always thought I would be successful on the back of him, because, and I won't, talk too much about who he is or what he does, but, obviously, I don't need to do that. But I always thought, oh, I'll be successful on the back of him. He's a great writer, etc. And actually, it's been the complete opposite. Yeah. So that person hasn't done particularly well, and yet has incredible gifts. And yet, I was so determined, like you are, girl. And it was actually, there's nothing better than a direction like that. And the same when people are unwell, they have something, it's like there's nothing better than the thought that you're not going to be here to make you really find out what's going on within. And that's the journey. All my guides are stepping right in with that one. So that, makes us really determined to stay in this experience. And so for us, it was our children and not illness. But for some people, it is that diagnosis, or it is that message that's like, oh my goodness, I cannot do another year of this, or, in an abusive relationship, or a place of work, or wherever it might be, or a physical body message.
You need a why. I think this is the point, isn't it? You need a why. And I think you were given your why, and I was given my why. And it's where, you have tunnel vision. You just go straight ahead. You don't think of anything else. And failure became a non-option. Failure was just not an option. I was going to be successful. Doesn't matter how, what, where. And I remember when I was, when obviously I had to think about going back to work or do something. When I made the decision to do this, my brother and my father at the time, and everybody thought I was crazy. They thought, if you want to go back to work, you'd go back to being a lawyer. And irrespective of that, the fact that I had been out for a good 10 years and I have to start from scratch, that doesn't matter. You're going to be a lawyer, you go and be a lawyer, and da-da-da. And I remember thinking, no, I know what I want to do. And again, even that decision, I think I could have been swayed into going back into law, but the thought of, because I remember being in the corporate environment, and if I'm starting from scratch, I knew how much effort I would have to put in. So doing 70, 80 hours a week away from my kids, they already weren't seeing the father, they weren't seeing the mother either, and they would I'll have to get a nanny. That was horrendous thought. I thought, I'd rather starve. All right. So I'm not going to put my kids through that. When they don't see the father, don't see the mother, they will grow up without a parent. I was not going to do that to my kids. So this was another reason for my decision. If I did not have my kids, if I was not in that situation, I don't know if I'll be here, Susan. Same. And so this is where the motivation comes, isn't it? For people who are ill, as you're saying, the motivation is, I actually want to live. I don't want to die yet. And that's what the why comes in. The why has to be incredibly solid before you make you make a solid decision. And then remember, once you made a decision, you need to have the gumption to stick by. Because remember, I'm sure you had so many roller coaster rides on the way, as I have on the way. This journey isn't smooth, and it's not easy, but you stick with it because your why is seen, on a daily basis. I wake up in the morning and I see both my kids in the evening and so forth. And every day that I get the boost, okay, I need to carry on for them, right?
And I think the drive as well, you know, what's coming to me as you're talking is that the the pure drive of your spiritual mission, and you
Mm,
may not even know, like if you're listening to this, you may not even know specifically what that is, and it doesn't have to be what we're doing. It will be what lights you up, but that
yeah,
pure drive within you, you will have chosen at some point in your life to wake up and go, oh my
yeah,
goodness, on a soul level, I remember who I am. And actually, I'm a creator being and I co create with the universe, whether you
mm-hmm.
believe in God, source, whatever it might
Whatever,
be,
yeah.
you're co creating.
Mm-hmm.
So you're co creating. So basically, you have everything you need at your fingertips, but you just forget you have everything you need. So you have to go through all that meandering, which I'm sure you did, a meandering of like,
Mm.
doing the work on yourself, which is never ending. And
Oh,
you're
and that was never ending,
constantly
and it shouldn't be, because
clearing.
yeah, because we
Yeah.
I
What's
think
the point
yeah,
otherwise?
because we're growing, aren't we? We need to,
Yeah.
when you, I think the
Yeah.
only time you stop growing is when you die, when you're in 6 foot under. So
Yeah.
otherwise
Or
you're
up
constantly
or
growing.
above.
Well,
Or
yeah,
above.
well, you're spiritually above, but physically body
Yeah.
is in 6 feet under. But
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
I meant.
Yeah.
You should, there should be an element of constant growth and learning
Yes.
and developing. And so, of course,
Yeah.
you have to clear. And we are physical, we are spiritual beings having this physical experience. So we
Yeah.
do take on energies from other people. We take in ideas, and then people coding into us as well. You'll
Yeah.
understand those
Yeah.
codes and those, and then obviously there's entities, and
Yeah.
and there's low vibration entities which come in as well. So people don't actually realize how much we're surrounded by entities. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not around.
And they're the vibrational match to where
Yeah,
you are. So, you know,
exactly.
keeping that vibration refined
Mm.
and clear.
It's very
And
important.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very, especially right now. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, we can have a whole discussion about that, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
do know that, that this is something that I teach quite a lot. And whereas, if somebody falls low, if they go into low vibration, the problem is in times, these low vibrational entities latch on at that moment, and then it's in their interest to
Mm-hmm.
keep you in that low vibration, because they're
Mm-hmm.
feeding off you. If you raise from
Yeah.
it, you'll detach, and they don't want that. And this is why you get stuck in
Exactly.
loop. And with alcoholism, and there's so many other things that come up. And I see it from those addictions from the compassionate point of view, because I know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's not the individual's fault. They have these issues. And anyway, we could have a whole new discussion on that, but
I saw that in PTSD with veterans, like going way back. That was,
yeah,
real eye-opening for me. And I did that pro bono, by the way, like you did yeah.
speaking
So
correctly.
working with veterans, I saw a trend, or I saw a pattern, and that's how research happens, doesn't it? Anecdotally, and then it ends up being research. And just noticed a pattern with early childhood trauma and entity and attachment. And I noticed that I could see it in the eyes, but every single veteran I work with, once we'd cleared the trauma, the early childhood trauma, firstly, the PTSD symptoms were not there anymore, but also the attachment and the entity had gone as well. And they started to show me, oh, I want to kind of set up a charity, or I want to help with this person, or I understand now why I didn't die on the battlefield and my mate did, it's like this kind of stuff. Yeah. So those low vibrations that you were just talking about, Gull, actually, it makes total sense that if people have experienced, sexual abuse,
Yes.
childhood trauma, domestic abuse in relationships, and also, past life stuff as well, but just talking about this life, then this is held in the field, isn't it? As
Of
a
course.
cellular vibration.
Yeah, and then you attract entities
Yeah.
who are on those low vibrations, and then they keep you there. So it's like a vicious cycle. You're stuck there now until you seek external help. But I mean, that's another conversation altogether, because even when you are on that level, they don't even think about seeking help, because you don't understand what's going on. And those entities, it's in their interest to make sure that your eyes are covered and your ears are closed up to hearing anything like that. But anyway, well, this has been a fascinating conversation. We have to discuss it further a bit more, but maybe more on Money Talkies. Tell us, Susan, where can we connect with you? How can we find you on the internet?
Sure. So my website is my name, So it's Susan Kennard, Kennard, and then .co.uk, and in the States .co.uk, because they don't say co.uk. And across Facebook the same, LinkedIn, Twitter, it's all my name, Instagram. The only difference is sometimes there's a 1 at the end of it. So it might be Susan Kennard 1 Instagram, Susan Kennard 1 on LinkedIn, and then everything else is Susan Kennard. And I have a
Wonderful.
YouTube channel as well, which is my name again, just Susan Kennard.
Wonderful. So all the links that and all the social media handles that Susan just mentioned will be in our notes. So if you listen to us on the podcast, remember in the show notes, we will have all the links to Susan. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then down below in the description section, we will have all her links once again. Do check her out. She is one kick-ass lady, someone I recently came across actually on LinkedIn. That's how we connected. And I fell in love with her work, and her energy is amazing, as you can see. Do check her out, and do see how she can help you and support you on your abundance journey. And I want to reiterate this. If you are on an abundance journey, if you are looking at transitioning and all sorts of things, or trying to work out why you have where you're stuck where you are, I want to reiterate this. Childhood traumas, other elements of traumas, doesn't have to be childhood traumas, but any kind of traumas, be it goal trauma, be it financial trauma, be it sexual trauma, any kind of trauma will hold you back. And so in those circumstances, you do need to seek help. And in that regard, both Susan and I can help you. So do check her out and see how she can help you in any of those areas we just talked about. Anyway, so thank you so much, Susan. We have to have you back on Money Talk, because I love talking to you, darling. So please do come back. But thank you for being an amazing guest for us today.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining me and Susan today on Friday Feature. I will be back on another Friday Feature with another amazing guest. I'm listening to their journey and finding out how they changed their life by changing their mindset. Until the next time we meet, this is Gull signing off. Take care and bye for now.